Here's a story that pretty much encapsulates the talk for tonight. Two brothers shared a field. One was married with many children. The other was a bachelor. They worked very hard and split their harvest equally. One day, the married brother thought it was not fair. His brother had no children to care for him in old age. So he put an extra bag of grain in his brother's barn. At the same time, the other brother, too, decided it was not fair. His brother had so many more mouths to feed, so he put an extra bag of grain into his brother's barn. As the brothers continued to do this, they would be surprised every morning as they found out they had the same amount of grain as before. One day they passed each other on the road, each carrying a sack of grain for the other. It was then that they realized what they had been doing for one another and embraced each other in a moment of true brotherly love. So thank you for coming tonight. That talk pretty much says it all. There's so much about that talk. The essence of it being the capacity to see the self in other. So I thought I'd talk a little tonight about a couple topics. One is how you can incline your mind toward wholesome states. You know, some of these thoughts are quite out of control, if you haven't noticed. And some of our attention is malleable. You know, we can focus it in different ways. I'd like to talk a little bit too about the shadow side of generosity. You know, what's on the other side of giving? And learning how to receive, which is an important part of generosity. And to talk a little bit in general about this principle of what's called in Pali, in the language of the Buddha, of dana. And the word dana means generosity. It's the practice of generosity as a spiritual practice. So there was someone who wanted to do some exploration with me. And his life was really, he was just overwhelmed with how much he had going on. Between an entrepreneurial business and his family and issues with his parents and the places where he was serving, you know, as a volunteer. And he was just telling me how hard it was and how he couldn't keep up with it. And I asked him a question which sounds a little bit harsh maybe, but I said, so what's good about all of this? And he paused, and his first response was nothing. You know, it's hard. But the more he reflected on what was good about it was the fact that he had created much of what he wanted in his life. He had a family that he'd always dreamed of. He had this business where he was really making a difference and having an impact. He had, you know, intimacy in his life. And the conversation quickly turned from, this isn't what's working, to like, how blessed am I to have all of this creativity and activity in my life? That alchemy of gratitude is something not to be to underestimate. When you can shift your attention to gratitude, something happens inside. So I thought we might do a short reflection on this, if you like. When you're ready, you can close your eyes. And take a moment to turn your attention perhaps to someone or something in your life for which you feel gratitude. And in your own way, you might see if you can visualize this, turn up the color, the intensity of the light. can you recall any sounds or words or tone of voice that you associate with this? And in particular, sense what it feels like inside. You might ask internally, what does gratitude feel like? Can I locate that feeling? And just sense if you can be with that. And just notice how in these 2 minutes of reflection, of turning your attention to something for which you feel grateful and sort of resting or returning your attention there, anything that might have shifted internally. And when you're ready, you might let your breath deepen. And if you like, you can open the eyes or remain with them closed. This practice of gladdening the mind can be an important part of cultivating a greater sense of mindfulness or non-judging awareness. Just turning our attention to that can have a lot of impact. Of course, it's easy to forget, but the feeling of gratitude is a feeling of receptivity. There's actually there can even be a sense of enoughness in the moment. Thank you for this moment. In yoga philosophy, it's described as santosh, the practice of contentment. Thank you for this moment. It's a story of a nun, kind of advanced in her practice, was going to a monastery to do the practices before she came to the end of her life, and they were asked her final words, and you sort of leave your final poem, on your deathbed, and her final poem was, "Everything is fine. I have no complaints." What a nice way to go out. So gratitude can be a practice, a way of directing your attention toward a particular inquiry. Some ways that people find it helpful is before you practice meditation, to just pause and reflect on someone or something you feel grateful for. And it kind of inclines your mind in a positive way toward meditation. Have you ever had the thought, I have to meditate? The difference if you just change a few words there, I get to meditate. There's a world of difference in there. So I try and remember that sometimes. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I get to meditate. Another way that people find helpful is before you go to sleep, just to keep a little journal by your bed and just write down a few things you're grateful for. It's a very powerful way of inclining the mind in a positive way before you lose awareness. So, of course, when we practice this sense of gratitude, inevitably it's tied in with generosity, with a natural desire to give from a place of fullness. And of course, there are obstacles that arise when we look at generosity. I've never seen this show again, but I saw one episode of, I think the show was called 30 Days, where they take someone and they immerse them in a 30-day environment somewhere. And this episode blew my mind. I'll read you the blurb about the show. David Stacy, a 33-year-old Christian man from West Virginia, agrees to make a drastic life change for 30 days when he moves to the largely Muslim community of Dearborn, Michigan. David struggles with his feelings and previous prejudices against a religion that does not believe in Christ and in the minds of many Americans is associated with September 11. He was a fundamentalist Christian, and he agreed to live in this community in Dearborn, Michigan, and to see his transformation over 30 days was just unbelievable. The contempt that he held people in initially. There was one event where the husband was going to go somewhere, but he wasn't comfortable with him alone with his wife in the house. And he was so deeply offended, by that. And it caused this whole exchange of sort of like deepening truth-telling. And he went to a cleric to study some of the Quran, and initially was, arguing with him. And at the end, he said, I'm a contractor, down in West Virginia, and I would be proud to hire any of these men on my crew. To see that transformation was absolutely amazing. There's another version to that story that I read. Two brothers shared a field. One was married with many children. The other was a bachelor. They worked very hard and split their harvest equally. One day the married brother thought it was not fair. His brother had no children to care for and less mouths to feed, so every night under the cover of darkness, he crept over to his other brother's harvest and stole a bag of grain. At the same time, the older brother, too, decided it wasn't fair. His brother had so many children who would care for him in his old age while he had none. So every night under the cover of darkness, he crept over to his brother's harvest and stole a bag of grain. As the brothers continued to do this, they would be surprised every morning as they had found they had the same amount of grain as before. And one night they passed each other on the road, each carrying a sack of grain they had stolen from the other. It was then that they had realized what they had been doing to one another and were immediately ashamed of their ways. So we can easily fall into the trap of other, where accessing gratitude is very, very difficult. And the beautiful thing about focusing on the heart practices is they reveal wherever you're tight. You might close your eyes again. We'll do another brief meditation. You might bring into mind someone that you've had maybe a little bit of rough contact with, or feeling a little separate or frustrated or distant. Just take a moment to reflect on this person. And when you do a little role reversal, what do you imagine they are needing? And is there a sense if that need was met, maybe not by you, but if that need was met, what would that be like for them? And just noticing whatever arose for you, and you can deepen your breath. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open again if you like. We all clench in certain ways toward certain people at different times for a variety of reasons. And when we practice generosity, it's not necessarily an easy practice. When you see someone who's begging on the street and you decide not to give to them, have you ever noticed how desperate you are to not make eye contact? It's a very natural process that just happens in the brain. That when someone is there in need and we decide not to give, we do everything we can to avoid eye contact. As a self-preservation thing, it's nothing necessarily bad. There's empathy and compassion fatigue, and we have different ways of moderating. But it's quite revealing to see where we find it hard to give, and to do that inventory. I personally have a dread around Christmas time and Christmas presents. And fortunately, in my family, we've sort of disbanded that practice a really long time ago. Because I could never feel the pressure of finding the perfect gift for someone. Something they didn't know they wanted, but it's just the most amazing thing. The pressure of finding that, I couldn't take the psychic torment. Trying to imagine what someone needs but doesn't have. But I have found it really helpful to reflect on the 5 languages of love, if you're not familiar with those. The 5 ways that we most prefer to receive love and attention or affection from someone. And those 5 are touch, words or affirmation, quality time, acts of service, and gifts. And when you really go through that and ask yourself, what really resonates for me? Chances are 1 or 2 are most going to hit it for you. And as I've sort of reflected on those in my life of what most works for them, it's a very rich thing. And to know that this is what really connects with that person. Thankfully for my wife, gifts mean nothing. But I know quality time is really valued. So I find in this exploration of gratitude and generosity that one of the places that's most often overlooked is not only looking at what's between us and giving freely, but what's between you and receiving fully. That's a whole other piece of it. I was at a long retreat a number of years ago, and there was a kind of a senior teacher who had really made a difference in my life. I sort of read his stuff, and he really inspired me in a number of ways. And I saw him, and I just kind of made a beeline because I just wanted to connect with him and thank him and let him know, that the work he was doing really had impact on me. And he kind of looked through me and kind of mumbled a few words and kind of went on. And later I found myself actually angry, and I realized that I didn't feel received in that. I was kind of sincerely wanting to offer my thanks, and it wasn't received. And I can understand why. I think he's just like an absolute introvert and so forth. I get that. But it made me do an inventory of how I will deflect, or how I don't fully receive, or how I'll minimize my needs. And I read something that has really made a difference for me. There's a wonderful book called The Charisma Myth. I highly recommend. And it says that there are 3 kinds of, first of all, the myth is that you either have it or you don't. But you said there are ways you can do behaviorally that will sort of increase your sense of power and presence and compassion. But she had this one little technique that has really helped me. And if you've ever come up to thank me for something, maybe you've noticed me do this. What I would notice is that if someone would thank me, I would sort of cut them off about 2/3 of the way through and sort of just tell how great they are, or find some way to not fully receive it. So this is a practice. Whenever anyone thanks you or acknowledges you, wait 1 full second after they've spoken, and then take a breath and kind of let a feeling come up and express it on your face. and then say thank you, or like, I appreciate that coming from you. And what that does is it completes the cycle. And it actually was a little bit, it made me sort of take in the gratitude that was there. But I realized that if I had spoken to that teacher and he had received what I said, how much more fulfilling that would have been. So if you want to work on your receiving muscle, and you do happen to get compliments every now and then, try that. It's really quite powerful. One of the other techniques that's very, very helpful in terms of cultivating presence, and again, this is kind of mind-blowing, that after anyone speaks, wait 1 full second before you respond. It really changes things. Let me know what you notice if you practice that. I'd love to know. I thought we might do a little meditation on receiving, and to do this, we're going to do a meditation on sound with the bamboo flute. So there are powerful practices that are designed to cultivate this sense of receiving. And you can think of one way of meditation is receiving the moment as it is. And a really wonderful way to do this is through a meditation on sound. So if you like, you can close your eyes. And let your attention open to the sounds around you. And notice the sounds the furthest away, the sounds which are close by. And if you let this sound be your primary anchor, notice how it changes, like waves. Notice how your mind, without you even knowing it, will label the source of the sound, locate it, and evaluate whether it poses any danger or not. And if you'd like to play around a little bit with the practice of bare attention, notice if you can sort of disband the labeling process of the mind and just experience the sound as vibration. You'll notice that you cannot hear better by trying harder. It's more of a receiving of the sound vibrations. And as you continue in this practice, you might let your attention open to the sound of the bamboo flute and the space between the sounds. In your own time, let the breath deepen. So there's an aspect of practice which is about doing, of focus, developing a sense of inclined will. And there's also a quality of practice which is about cultivating your capacity to receive, just to fully be present and allow. One of the very first things the Buddha taught after his awakening, sort of his insight and realization, was a talk on generosity. And from this came a tradition called dana, which is all the monks were told or taught that these practices are priceless. You cannot put a price on the teachings and the practices. So therefore they cannot be charged, you cannot charge for these practices. But in the traditions of Asia, the monks were supported by the community. It was very much a culture of support. And in the culture where alms are given, even the little children, when they're little toddlers, have their little little thing of sticky rice to put in the bowl. It's just taught so early as a way of seeing self in other and other in self. And in Japan, I just found this out. The monks wear these very wide hats, very wide brims, and it's designed so that when you receive alms, you cannot see who's giving, and you cannot see who you're giving to make it a pure act of giving, an impersonal act of giving. For many, many years, I kind of taught and worked under the capitalistic framework. And I had an experience maybe 15 years ago, maybe even more, where I was working at Kripalu Center in charge of all the programming. And I contacted a fellow by the name of Bo Lozoff, who was the founder of the Ashram Prison Project. And he wrote the book, We're All Doing Time, which is one of the first books that really was all about bringing the Dharma into the prisons and really showing them they had the optimal environment for deep Dharma practice. And amazing guy. So I was doing a conference on service and invited him to come. And I said, and we can pay you this much. And he said, I'll come, but only on one condition, and I'm going to screw up your whole system. And I said, well, what's that? He said, I'm only going to come, if we do dana. And I thought, well, dana, bring her along. Sure. But then he explained what dana was. That there would be no charge for his services, and they would be available to everyone. And it was a very hard thing for us to do because we just didn't have any sense of how do you work with someone who works that way. And as it turned out, he went into a year of silence and he didn't come. But that conversation with him really inspired me. And I thought, I want to teach under that system sometime, of just to offer it freely and see what it's like. And it's a challenging system in the West because most of us are like, you pay something and you get something in return. But I love the fact that this class and the retreats that we offered are offered for no set fee. And I love the fact that no one is denied access to this class of the teachings of retreats. And it's really cool when there'll be a bunch of high school students who come in, just sort of like checking it out. And I know that they wouldn't come in if they had to pay $10, for a class. So the fact that there are so many who can come without feeling there's any monetary restriction feels great. And I also feel incredibly grateful for your support, for the class and for the church and for IMCW. There's something so powerful about this practice, that your support allows me to, as I like to joke, live my lavish lifestyle, but it allows me to do this and do the work that I do. So in this sort of Western Dharma, it's a big experiment in terms of how we practice generosity. But the essential practices themselves are to first move into that doorway of gratitude. Sometimes you can just do a gratitude meditation on the parts of your body that don't hurt, Even that is going to change your state in some powerful way, if you hang out with it long enough, And as you reflect on, particularly this time of year, the spirit of generosity in your life, and even more importantly, when it comes to really receiving, to really explore what's between you and receiving what others are wanting to offer you. Here's what the Buddha said. If living beings knew the fruit and final reward of generosity and the distribution of gifts as I know them, then they would not eat their food without giving to others and sharing with others, even if it was their last morsel and mouthful. If they should meet a person who is worthy of receiving a gift, selfishness would be free from their hearts. I find it really powerful that this practice of mindfulness, which we think so much of as a here and now, in the body discipline, which it is, inevitably leads us to a place of compassion. It leads us to a deepening sensitivity internally, to be able to identify what's here, how to be with it. But inevitably it connects us to others as well. So thank you for coming out tonight. I wish you a happy, whatever you have ahead of you. I did bring some more CDs, and my Body-Centered Inquiry CD is here too. So if you're needing any last-minute gifts or need some coasters for your table, they work out really well. Thanks for your generous support. If you like to be on the mailing list, you can sign up in the back as well. I'm going to be away on the New Year's retreat. Next week we have Trudy Mitchell Gilkey is going to be here, who is awesome. And I'll see you in the new year.